It's a great pleasure to have you in this interview. Thank you very much, man.
Hello, Azan. Thank you very much for having me. Look forward to all of the chats and all the great memories we're going to share on this podcast.
That's awesome, man. Before getting into Davey's Hall of Fame career, let's talk a bit about what have you been doing lately in wrestling. You've been killing it, man, in MLW and I think Josh Barnett, Bloodsport.
Yes, for sure. Um, I've been granted a great opportunity for Major League Wrestling with Court Bauer, and I feel that I'm able to show a really good representation of my true skills over there and in other competitions like Josh Barnett's Bloodsport. So it's been awesome for fans that want to tune in. You can check out Major League Wrestling on the YouTube channel. Just type in MLW and that should show up. And their latest episodes show up there, I believe, every Monday. But it's live on BN Sports. Excuse me, not live, but it's filmed for BN Sports every Saturday at 9 p.m. So you can check all the latest stuff of mine on there.
You know, one of your last matches I saw, I think it was you against Loki. And man,
Yes.
it was such a fresh breath of air because it was like an actual competitive sport fight. As you know, okay, we've been having some kind of flash wrestling going on lately, but that match, it felt so much different. Tell us about that style that you presented.
Yeah, that style, like I said, I'm best able to represent my style, Major League Wrestling. They got a lot of great talent over there, and it takes two to tango. So Low Key is a world-renowned, awesome professional wrestler and mixed martial artist as well in his own right. So, when you have two different styles like that, and of course I'm a lot bigger than him,
Yep,
we can have a lot of fun with telling a good story to the audience. You know what I'm saying?
right.
And I felt that the match really came across, uh, and the story really came across good and strong, and especially the finish. That was the main thing about the low key match was when he had me. I was standing and he had me in his inverted triangle choke,
That's
and
right.
right before I was going to pass out, I was able to pin him 1, 2, 3, which in professional wrestling that grants you the win. So you know, um, even with a submission specialist like Loki,
Right.
you have to use your head. You have to be smart, and that's how I came up with doing that finish. Kind of similar to what Bret Hart and Roddy Piper did years ago
That's right with
at
the Rock.
WrestleMania 8. Yeah. So, and people need to think what makes sense and think outside the box. It doesn't just have to be your finisher that you win with all the time. You have to
Yes.
think. You have to keep everything fresh and surprise the audience and uh, give them something that they're not expecting. So that's what I think was really good about it.
That's speaking of styles. Some people they call the current it's the modern style of wrestling, but I think it's been there forever with Davey, Dynamite, Owen. But I think the difference when we watch that matches, it didn't feel so stagey or choreographed. But sometimes when I feel, well, I'm not here to bash the current style, but when I see it, something it doesn't look as, let's say, as spontaneous as the style of Davies and Dynamites. What's the key? What's the secret?
Well, it's just an in-ring chemistry that is apparent with all these guys that, I mean, really, we're the best kind of, I don't want to say the best kind of actors, but we're the best kind of sports entertainers because a lot of everything that we do is improvised and we don't necessarily think about it before we're doing it. And what I mean by that is that you have to be spontaneous and you have to think on the fly and learn how to think on the fly. So, people that choreograph their match start to finish, it's
Right.
fine. Don't get me wrong, that's kind of the way it's done nowadays, but
Right.
especially for TV. But you also have to feed off the audience that's there
Exactly.
live
Right.
and with your opponent's reaction. So we can't go and have a match that goes A, B, C, D, E, F, G, and do the whole alphabet.
Right.
Because if we miss letter B, we have to go. We're totally lost. We're not able to go to letter C. We're trying to fix letter B. What happened there?
Right.
So there's a rhythm and tempo with that, and also, it's just good natural chemistry. The
Yes.
more that you work with a certain guy, you get to know his style, and you get to adjust your style to his. Different flavors of ice cream, different wrestling styles. Sometimes polar opposites can make the most interesting matches too. And then also guys that are, you also have to complement each other. It's like in a way, like a dance, and it takes two to tango. And so anybody that makes somebody in a match, it does take two to tango, but, there's guys that are out there that do a great job of complementing or hiding an opponent's weakness and being able to showcase their skills. You know what I'm saying?
Yes. Is
So
it me?
that's important.
It is. Is it me or just sometimes, uh, like currently, sometimes I feel the wrestlers they would go, okay, everybody knows it's not real, so even the match itself, they'll play it like, for example, okay, let's do thing that it's like, when a person would stand forever waiting for the dive to catch without like paying attention to the viewers' intelligence and these kind of stuff. I think this is my biggest problem with current day wrestling. Do you agree with that?
I do agree with that. you know, Hassan, I'm sure you probably watched a lot of the old 1997 Bret Hart stuff with Shawn Michaels and Steve Austin.
Right.
There was a feeling of realism in there, and probably some of it with Shawn Michaels was half real or three
Yeah.
quarters. Um, but there was that sense of realism, and I don't think a lot of the promos were so staged as they
Yep.
are now. So I think that the point was getting across, but they really fed off each other's energy, and they took the business more seriously back then. But of course, back in those days, kayfabe was more prevalent and more, taken seriously. Now, everybody, but you have to, as Stone Cold Steve Austin actually said, you have to think, shoot, but work. If that
Right.
makes sense.
Right.
So the more that you're thinking that what you're doing out there is a work, if you're not able to get yourself into that state, the more that it's going to show, and that you're not in a combative professional fight. Let's say you're just out there playing wrestler, and that's what I think that a lot of people do now is they play wrestler. I don't think it's good. So although what we're doing out there is sports entertainment, you have to have that feeling of realism. You know what I'm saying? Oops. I think your thing just froze on me. Yeah. So where I was leaving off before we got cut off, Hassan,
Right.
was that I was saying that Stone Cold Steve Austin and Bret Hart in 1997 and Shawn Michaels, there was that feeling of more of a realism out there, and you could feel it with the atmosphere. And probably half of it with Bret Hart and Shawn Michaels was real, but I don't think that their promos were as staged before, but it felt like it was more real and there was more passion behind what they were saying.
Right.
And of course, there was a lot of frustration actually with Bret Hart and the WWF at the time. But
Right.
like Stone Cold Steve Austin said, you got to think shoot but work out there, and you have to have that mentality um, to create realism and to make money. You know what I'm saying?
Yep.
So you don't want to go out there being playing wrestler or playing wrestler, I like to call it.
Right.
You want to be out there thinking that you're out there for in a professional combative contest, you know.
That's
So
right.
I think that was what was different then, and also kayfabe was a lot different then, and the
Yes.
internet was just kind of breaking out. But you know, they're doing a lot of good stuff now. It's just that you know, some things need to change inside of the ring, but that's just my opinion. So
Definitely. I'm 100% with you. So let's get into the career of one of my favorite and many wrestling fans' favorites around the world. Your dad, the legendary Davey Boy Smith, the British Bulldog. Man, you know, when I was preparing for the interview, I rewatched some of Davey's matches, and the thing that stood out to me, of course, beside to his great in-ring performance, he had that great aura and presence. You know what I mean? Like he
yes,
felt
I do.
like a superstar. It made me realize. I think he was the biggest European superstar of all time. Do you think Davey was underrated when it comes to charisma and his aura and presence on TV?
Well, you know, Hassan, I feel that Davey and Dynamite Kid had were both incredible athletes. They could do amazing things even when they got their bodies. They built them up probably bigger than they should have been, but legendary characters, legendary performers,
Right.
and they both had a certain special aura to them when they were in the ring that was unique and different from everybody else. And you know, they were both one. You know, my dad, he was a one of a kind, once in a lifetime kind of character, and you know, I was unfortunate that I wasn't able to induct him into this year's 2020 Hall of Fame, but that has been postponed, and it will happen. For any fans that are wondering, I do not know when it's going to happen. Fingers crossed, this coronavirus
Yeah.
passes over and it happens at SummerSlam, but I'm not sure at this time.
That's right. Speaking of the Hall of Fame, I've never like there was such a request or demand from wrestling fans. I do remember Randy Savage. Everybody was calling for Randy Savage, and the British Bulldog as well. These two, like the fans around the world, I think there was some kind of petition going on to get the British Bulldog. So
Yes.
that is a lot.
Yeah, my friend in the UK, Michael Finney, he had started the petition and he worked diligently week in, week out um, with getting a lot of performers to make videos for the petition, which
Right.
I'm greatly appreciative to everybody that signed the petition and did videos. It was more just a matter of time before WWE decided on it.
Right.
What made them decide on this year versus other years, I don't know. But I'm glad that he is in, and it's just the official, you know, ceremony has to happen, which is awesome.
That's right.
Um, and you know, it was great that the Macho Man finally got inducted as well.
Right. Right. At the moment, we have a lot of European stars that rose in the wrestling industry. Is there anyone who you can see some kind of Davies in him, or he would remind you of Davy?
Uh,
Not
well,
necessarily in their ring, or he would give you that Davies feeling or aura about him, or
well, besides myself, I might have to go with when he was active as a wrestler, Tyson Kidd,
right,
because he spent a lot of time with my father and my family as well. So there was some subtle mannerisms and you know just little things that were probably prevalent. But aside from him, you know, there's not really anyone I could compare him to necessarily besides maybe myself, but Braun Strowman, he does a pretty good running power slam. Same with Bobby
Yeah.
Lashley. So, there's subtle similarities between those big guys and the running power slam with my dad. But it's hard to compare him. It's like trying to compare like Bret Hart to somebody now. There's
Yeah.
lots of comparisons, but exactly the same, or they all had a unique style about them, and their moveset was fit perfectly for them. You know what I'm saying?
Right. Right.
Same with anybody else, like Eddie Guerrero, or
Yes.
it's you can see similarities, but not exact. So
I think the first match, like I've seen, obviously not live, but it was Davey versus Finley from World of Sport. Was that the first footage of Davey in the ring?
that is not. That was a great match, though. It's on
Yep,
YouTube and Daily Motion, I believe.
that's
I
right.
want to say uh, my friend Robbie Brookside gave me a DVD, and I think the earliest footage was him and Bernie Wright. I think Davey was about 15 or 16, and they were both skinny little kids, but they were doing a lot of acrobatic stuff, a lot of flips to the
Right.
feet. I think they were both wearing blue singlets and high white boots too, which was the typical
Yeah.
English young boy
Time.
here in that time. So I believe that's the earliest stuff is Davey and Bernie Wright, about
Speaking
79 or so.
Speaking of that, the Finley match, I'm not sure you know this trivia. I was speaking with TJ and I told him Finley is the only wrestler who had single matches with Davey, Owen, Brett, Jim the Anvil, you and him.
Yes.
Yeah, which is pretty much impressive to have such longevity.
Yeah, you know what? That really is. I'm really glad that I got a chance to uh, wrestle with Mr. Finley in the ring. We had a great match in ECW back
Yep.
in 2009. It was my debut match for WWE when I came back with the Hart Dynasty.
Right.
And Finley was one of, I would say, in my top three people that I've ever stepped foot in the ring with.
Wow.
He
Yeah.
was really a world-class professional, and he's another one of those guys. There's not going to be anybody out there like him. And
Right.
actually, what's cool about that too is that I wrestled with Finley in the ring, and I've also wrestled his son too in New Japan.
Oh yeah, that's right. That's
Yeah,
right.
and
Yeah,
he's a
that's
really
awesome.
good he's a really good talent too.
Right.
And I'm very sorry to hear that Mr. Finley got let go from WWE.
Yeah, heard about
Hopefully,
that.
he'll be back when this coronavirus swipes out.
Right.
But
Right.
I wish him the best.
Speaking of Japan, everybody was looking forward for you to take part into the All Japan. Was it Carnival League or?
Yeah, so I was supposed to take part in the 2020 Champion Carnival tournament for All Japan Pro Wrestling. And that was a big disappointment because of everything that's happened with the coronavirus. But
Right.
it was a tournament that both my dad and the Dynamite Kid both competed in. Dynamite 91, my dad in 93, in
Right.
between WWF and his WCW tenure.
Right.
Um,
What
but,
were some of the
it
matches that
yeah,
that
it all
Davey
just
had?
got canceled. So
Right.
I'm sorry, what's that?
What were some of the matches that Davey had in that tournament?
Well, I've been trying to get a hold of as much of the footage as I can from it. I
Right.
know that he would have wrestled. I think in those days they were doing A blocks and B blocks. So I think in his block was Mizawa, Johnny Ace, the Patriot,
Wow.
Steve Williams, Terry Gordy,
Right.
Danny Crockett. But there's a match with him and Danny Crockett. I think that was the only one that aired, or him and the Patriot both aired on TV over there. But
Right.
they were both clipped, but they were good matches. Um, and then there was a couple tags. I know Rob Feinstein had quite a few of them, but they're on VHS, but they were handheld from All Japan.
Right.
But I had seen it before, but I lost the tape. But there was a tag match with Davey and Johnny Ace, which is funny, of all people,
Right.
versus Kobashi and Kikuchi. And then there was another one with
That's good.
Davey and the Eagle, who was George Hines, versus Danny Crawford and Doug Furness. And then there's one with him and Kawada
Yep.
that's online, that's handheld. It
Yeah.
was okay, but I like the other matches better than that one. So, but there's a guy on YouTube now named, I think his name's Matt D, but he's been posting all kinds of really interesting handhelds from All Japan from the early '90s. There's a singles with Davey and Kobashi from
Yes, you sent me
1990.
that. That's
Yeah,
awesome. You sent me that.
I don't know who this guy is, but I
Yeah.
like his videos, so hopefully nobody takes them down.
Yeah, hopefully. I think
Right?
he, I remember I asked you a question in Twitter. What was some of the underrated matches of Davey? You recommended the Terry Gordy match from All Japan. Man, that was
Yeah.
awesome.
Yeah, I really like that match. Terry Gordy was a hell of an athlete,
Yeah,
a great pro wrestler, and I mean, for a man his size, he could really move in the ring, and he was fluid. He had a good, steady intensity about him, and I mean, him and Davey, they really complemented each other's styles. Like when Davey was able to press slam him over his head, I
that
think he
was
pressed him
amazing.
about 5 times,
Right, that
and
was amazing.
yeah, good chemistry, good story. I mean, that's it's just it's it's just it's chemistry, it's science, right? It's just
Yeah,
two good guys in there, and you can
absolutely. Yeah.
feel it. So that was great. It was a great match. Trying to think of what were other ones I listed. I can't remember.
You've told me two matches, the Terry Gordy match and the Vader match from Clash of Champions.
Yes, that was
That
another one
is
that stuck out.
unbelievable match. And it's funny, although I am a big WCW fan, I didn't remember that match, so I rewatched it and I was totally blown away by it.
Yeah, that was an awesome match. Big Van Vader, rest in peace, of course. Always a really super nice guy to me.
Right.
Him and Davey had great chemistry. I don't know who was booking at the time in WCW. Of course, we can say it now. I wish that they would have put the title on Davey for a short period of time, even if it was only for a month or so, because I wanted to see the more of the matches with him and Vader.
Yeah.
They had the Clash of Champions, and then I think it was the Slamboree, or was it
Right.
Starcade or Slamboree?
Right.
That was the other one, and then they had another one on one of the Saturday Night Lives, I think.
Right.
That's on YouTube. But because they had great chemistry with each other too, and like those guys, they were physical with each other, man. I mean, that was, I would say, on the half side going to shoot rather than 50% going to work. You know,
Right.
Davey said that
So
Vader used to box his ears in, and man, they were hard and physical matches. But
awesome.
I like that. That's what's missing a lot of times now. I think
You
Very.
know, when you was talking about Davey having the WCW title run, I think their first Europe tour it was in 1994, right?
93.
Also, Davey were still around in it. Was he in
Yeah,
the
he was. You know what? He would have went in 93 because end of 93 he left WCW, I think, in November,
right?
and then he went to England and he was doing stuff over there with Max Crabtree
Right.
and the independent circuit, and he was kind of half promoting with Max. They were doing a good job, and then that following summer he returned at SummerSlam with WWF at the
Oh,
time. Yeah. So
because
any WCW stuff was 93.
right. I think so. The Sting and Vader title change was in 1993 in Europe. It would have made sense if Davey like got that title for a certain period of time in Europe, then they would switch it back. It's just fantasy booking, so but
Yeah. Davey had a really, I thought it was a good match with Vinny Vegas, who was Kevin Nash. That was his old character in WCW '93. I
Oh,
believe it's on YouTube or Daily Motion, but I think it was on the Europe tour as well. It would have been, I want to say England or Germany, I think, or
right,
maybe Ireland, one of those places. I thought it was in England though, but it was a good match, and
nice.
I don't think a whole lot of talent back in those days were going out of their way to make Kevin Nash look too good because they probably just saw him as a big guy, but didn't think that he'd one day become a big star. But I think Davey perhaps
Yeah, I knew that.
could foresee that, and he wanted to help Kevin Nash, and he gave him a good match on TV, and gave him lots of offense. And years later, Nash became obviously very successful in professional wrestling. So I
That's
know he
right.
was appreciative of that for to Davey. He had told me that before. So
Speaking of like Davis' chemistry with some of the guys that they are not known for the great matches, how about that Warlord series, man? One of my favorite matches of all time. It was Davey against Warlord.
I agree. I really like those matches.
I love them.
Davey became good friends with Warlord, and
Yeah.
I tried to reach out to Warlord a little bit as to give him a guest pass at the Hall of Fame, but I didn't hear anything back. Then
Oh,
coronavirus happened. So, but
right.
anyway, the matches with Warlord were really fun. I think that they were Warlord's best matches, to be honest with you.
Definitely by far.
And yeah, WrestleMania 7 was fun. They had another one in Tuesday
Tuesday
night
night.
in Texas. Yeah, that
Right.
was maybe my favorite one.
Yeah.
Um, and like Warlord, although maybe people don't want to think of him as being a great technical wrestler or a great pro
Right.
wrestler, he did his part in there and he did his best. And he moved around pretty good for Davey, and
Yeah.
he did work to the best of his abilities. And they told a good story.
Awesome.
And I mean, I don't think there's many people that could have picked up Warlord and walked around the ring with him like Davey did for that running power slam. I mean,
Yep.
I think Warlord even told Davey the first time he gave it to him, he said, "Man, I didn't think you were going to pick me up like that."
And what is impressive, like in the Tuesday night in Texas, I think he got him in the delayed suplex. It was like after 12 or 13 minutes into the match. So that
Yeah.
shows how amazing Davey was.
Yeah, Davey had pretty good cardio for a big guy like his size. And to have that muscular endurance 12, 13 minutes into the match. And from what I remember, it was a pretty fast paced match. There was lots of stuff off the ropes. I think Davey would have been pretty good at a lot of cross training stuff now
Yep,
because he wasn't, when he was in good form, he
right,
wasn't just strong, but he was pretty agile. He could flip to his feet. Uh, he could drop kick pretty high. I
right,
remember I saw him, I think, drop kick, was it Rick Martel or Haku from the top rope at the Royal Rumble 91?
right.
But they were standing on the top and he drop kicked him, I think, in the stomach, which is pretty high
Yeah, that's
and Davey was only 5'11", so to jump up that high it's pretty impressive. So
definitely. Speaking of, we were talking about Davies in Japan as well. So since we are on that topic, just tell us about the legendary tag team match against the British Bulldogs against, of course, the Malinkos from 1989. I think the Japan is still in Japan. It's still being regarded in a high regard.
yes, that match was fantastic. I got to work a little bit with Dean Malenko in WWE when he was a backstage producer there. And Dean Malenko was a fantastic professional wrestler. And, it was great that those guys were able to complement each other's styles. And, they had some high flying, they had some strong style in there.
Right.
And then they also had some UWF, submission style wrestling in there as well.
Yep.
I got to know Joe Malenko and got to see him, well, under unfortunate circumstances for Rocky Johnson's funeral. And Joe was a really, really cool guy. We got the chance to catch up, and he showed me Carl Gotch's necklace with the golden lion that he used to have.
That's cool.
And yeah, he's got a lot of Carl Gotch's stuff, which is
Right.
Something I've really admired and been a big fan of his. But the match was awesome. I think that them coming back from, a stint in WWF where they were working more of a WWF style. I think that a lot of fans were surprised to see that they had come back, and they were probably bigger than ever,
Yep.
but they were still able to go in the ring when they wanted to, turn it on to hot with guys like the
Right.
Malenkos and the Can-Am Express, that would being Danny Crawford and Doug Furness, and still be able to perform at a top tier like they were in '84.
Yeah.
So that was great to see. And one of my favorite tag team matches. Those guys, that was the first time that they ever worked, and you would have never have guessed it. You would have thought that,
Yes. Yep.
you know.
They had great
So
chemistry.
yeah,
Did
one of my favorite matches. I may even watch it again tonight. It's been a while.
That's awesome. Did you watch the Rock and Roll Express match from 1989?
I
In
did,
a
yeah,
way, I
yeah.
don't think I think it didn't live to the expectation. Like for some reason, it didn't click. Did you agree or?
Well, um, yeah, I remember watching it at the time. There was a clip version,
Yep.
and it was in Japanese commentary because we had it on VHS. And I watched it, and it was like after 10 minutes in, so I got to watch the full version years later.
Yeah.
From what I remember, Davey had told me was that Baba had asked them to go, I think it was straight from Japan to Kansas City, or they may have stopped over in Calgary for like a day, and then
Right.
they went right away to Kansas City. And he said that they were tired from a Japanese tour. I think Terry Gordy was on the show as well,
Right.
and he said that it was absolutely freezing cold in Kansas City, and
Yep.
they had to change in a trailer outside. And when they went outside, they were, I think he said Dynamite was just pounding down coffee and cigarettes and doing whatever he could
Yeah.
to keep warm. And he said that I just don't think that the styles really complemented each other that much. I don't.
Yep.
Davey didn't really say anything negative about them, but I remember Malenko actually told me. He said that he called Dynamite to see how the match went with the Rock and Roll Express.
Right.
And then he said that Dynamite answered the phone, and he said something like, "Oh, my man, fucking second bottle of whiskey right now is fucking horrible, fucking rotten." So he drank it off and said it was the shits. And then Dean laughed and whatever. But I never Davey didn't really say much about it other than I remember
Right.
the story about it being cold. They just
Right.
say, I just don't think that their styles matched.
Yep.
You
Yep.
know.
I see it. Let's talk a bit about Davy's career in Stampede. What were some of the highlights, rivalries there that you
Well,
enjoyed?
there was a little stuff in 1989 right before it closed down that I didn't think was that bad. I don't think. I think with Davey, as long as he was motivated and he was in there with the right opponent, I think that he could he could do really good. Um, there was like I know that he had like Stampede wasn't doing so great at the time business wise, and I
Right.
don't think anything was really going to be able to save it at that time. So they were trying to promote and push a lot of young, I'll say green talent like Gary Albright, Vulcan Singh,
Yep.
and Davey was having to work with them on spot shows in the main event because Owen was gone. He was in WWF. He came back in the summer of '89 and feuded with Dynamite, which they were hoping was going to re-spark something in Stampede, which it did for maybe a couple weeks, and then
Right.
Dynamite kind of disappeared or went on its own way. And
But
so
how
there
about
was there was good stuff with. I thought that Davey did some good stuff with Johnny Smith at the very end. They did a 60-minute Broadway, and
oh
that was on YouTube, but I think the WWE Network took it down because they
right.
have the rights to Stampede now. But that was good. They showed clips of it. There was a match with Davey and Steve Blackman that wasn't bad from '89.
Wow, yeah.
which I think Steve was pretty green at the time, but I think Davey was he was trying to make Steve and make something good out of it with what they were dealt with, because there just wasn't a whole lot of talent, and guarantees were low, and
Yeah.
the houses were low. So what else could you have done? But some of the promos he did, him and Dynamite, I liked in '89. There was good intensity behind them when they were about to feud.
Yep.
And unfortunately, Davey got into a car accident with Chris Benoit, Sumo Hara, Jason the Terrible, Carl Moffat, who's a complete idiot, um, and Ross Hart. Yeah. And I think Kim Shaw maybe. So Davey had, it was on the 4th of July, and they were going up north for a spot show. And the car started hydroplaning, and they were turning off and almost went off a cliff, and they
Wow.
rammed into the side of a truck. And Davey ended up getting a fractured neck from it. I think he got like 37 stitches in his head, completely concussed. And he had to come back a couple weeks, I think like within a month, because Stu didn't have any other top stars to take his place. Actually, that's when Owen came back. I'm sorry. And he was on a honeymoon with Martha, because he had just been let go with WWF, and I think he had to cut his honeymoon completely short or cut it out. And Bruce asked him to come back and bring the houses up and feud with Dynamite, which they did. They did some really really good stuff, but it just wasn't enough to get things rolling again.
How about some of the early 80s stuff in Stampede? I really liked Davy's work there.
I did too. I liked, a lot of his early matches with Dynamite were really good.
Yep.
The one where he won I think it was the middleweight title from Dynamite with, he was getting suplex from the outside of the ring inside, and he dropped behind and gave him a high angle backdrop for the finish. It was a good finish. It was a good match.
Nice.
I think that he had some good stuff with teaming up with Bruce too. There's some tag stuff with him and Bruce against the Cobra and Hiro Saito. A few other Japanese guys like that.
So,
But I'd probably go with Dynamite, and he did some good stuff with Bruce as a tag team.
so my favorite Stampede match of all time, I'm not sure if you've seen it or not. It's a 5-on-5 elimination match. It was Davies and the Hart brothers, Bret, Keith, and Bruce, against Dynamite, the Great Gamma, and I think Danny Davis, and some other two wrestlers. And I think it came to Bret and Davey against Dynamite and maybe Great Gamma and Danny Davis, and they killed it. Did you see this match?
You know what? It sounds familiar. Was it an elimination style?
It is, yeah.
You know what? I did. I haven't. Is it on YouTube now?
I think I had it on the one of the Stampede tapes where Hearts on Fire, or I think it was Hearts on
Yeah.
Fire tape, yeah. You need to rewatch
I'm gonna
that.
try and YouTube it later. It's been a while, so I hadn't seen it. But all four of those talents sound, of course, great stuff's gonna happen out of that. So, but I don't quite remember it. But yeah.
So at which stage do you think Davey became the complete worker or wrestler? Is it by Stampede or when he did get to WWF?
Well, I think that he was always pretty good. Like, I think when he was in WCW in about '93, another great match that he had was with William Regal from Halloween Havoc '93. So I think around that time, it seemed like he could kind of work anybody's style. Like he could work with guys like Vader, and then he could work a technical style with the English style with William Regal.
Right.
He was in good shape, and I think he was pretty motivated then. I want to say it was probably around that time, and then he was of course really great in like '89, '90, but he just became more experienced by like '93. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
It's because he had kind of been everywhere, and then was coming full circle around. So yeah, I would probably say about
93.
that. Yeah, 93. Yeah.
So of course the icing of the cake is Davey's, I think, WWF WWE career. Uh, we have a guest. Let's try to connect with him so we can talk about Davey's career in WWF. Let me try. Uh,
Sure.
hey.
Hello.
Hey,
How's it going?
we, hey, we have JJ Wilson Tyson Kid joining us. I think Tyson, you need to share on your camera.
It's so weird. I don't know why it's maybe I press this. Aha. I am currently almost home. I'm driving home. I'm grabbing a coffee.
TJ
Oh,
has.
nice.
Can
Thank
you
you
guys
very
hear me?
much, TJ, for joining us in this conversation, paying tribute to one of the all-time great wrestlers, the British Bulldog, Davey Boy Smith.
Oh, for sure. My pleasure.
So, Tyson, of course, you got to know Davey in a personal level as well. Just
Yes.
tell us about your relationship with him growing up.
Um. So growing up, it was kind of funny. I'm so sorry. One second. I just have to put in this order. I'm so sorry. If you guys can just talk for a second.
Yeah, sure.
Not a
Uh,
problem.
Harry
Hey,
just,
Hassan,
yep.
before we go back onto the while he's ordering, do you ever drink Turkish coffee?
Yep, I did.
Yeah,
Actually, I love it. Yeah.
I make it every morning now myself.
Oh,
I
really?
saw on your Instagram you're making that Turkish coffee
Oh, I
on
love
the
it, man.
on the stove.
Yeah. If you have it, you'll really like it. It's really small, like but
Yep.
it's almost like an espresso shot, but it tastes better than espresso. But it's
Got it.
really strong. Strong is
That's why I've
really
become like a
strong.
cold brew fan. It tastes it because cold brew, so the coffee's never heated, so it has a different. It hasn't gone through that chemical reaction, so it has a little bit of a naturally like sweeter taste.
Yeah. And the Turkish coffee though, if I mean it's like any coffee, but if it goes cold and you try to reheat it, it's terrible. It doesn't
Oh
taste.
yeah.
Yeah, it's bad. It's no good.
Is
And you
it
Um,
can't and you can't boil it too much either because it tastes bitter. So once it starts foaming, you have to slowly start to pour it in to the cup
God,
and then let it foam a little bit more. But it's kind of a science to make it. It's like anything else. You get better with
yeah, get
practice.
better as you get those reps in.
Yeah.
so
Uh,
during the quarantine, we are discovering a lot of skills about Harry. He's cooking sushi.
Sushi.
He's making
Yeah.
coffee. I think it should be your next business,
I,
opening
I'm the
some.
opposite. I'm just sitting at home eating pre-made meals that I do meal plan and like playing video games. I haven't learned any new skills.
Uh, that's okay. But man, I got I was watching a ton of Netflix and I got just burned out of that. So
So
Yeah,
going back, Tyson, to your relationship with Davey,
yeah.
just tell us about
So as a
about it.
kid, I was very intimidated by him just by how big he was and just seeing him on TV. I've seen him on TV before I'd ever actually met him. So to meet him as a young kid, and I was very small, to meet him, I was very intimidated. But he's actually was such a nice guy that I kind of got over the intimidation quickly, but I still was very nervous and like shy around him just because, again, it's a guy I've seen on TV. And at this point, I've never been around a person this big and this muscular on like a daily basis. Then you fast forward a little bit, and you know, I started to get really close with Davey, and I at one point was working out in the gym with him like every day. But like sometimes our car rides, if it was just Davey and I, the car rides would just be kind of silent. Maybe if he asked me a question, I would answer. Our workouts would be kind of like, I would just comment on like the exercise we were doing. I just was really shy around him, and we would like not work out in silence. If he asked me stuff, I would answer his questions, and we would talk a little bit. But then I wouldn't be able to. I was like too shy or nervous to keep the conversation going. So like once it like talked a little bit, then it just would die out, and just to be silent, we'd be back to working out. But once I got past that, I mean, just such a great guy. So easy to talk to. Is actually the funny part of how nervous I was. He's actually very easy to talk to. Great guy. The thing I mean, there's a lot of great qualities Davey had, but I think the one that hits the most to me was his generosity. His generosity was on a
Yeah.
whole different level than most.
Yeah.
Right. I think there are a lot of influence in you, TJ, especially in your early career. Like when I was speaking with Harry early in the interview, I told him which wrestler, like you saw a lot of similarities with Davies. He mentioned you, especially
Yes.
I think you were paying tribute to him by your attire and by wearing
Thank you. Thank you too.
some
Yeah.
of
Oh man, like
his boots here.
those boots. Yeah. And I remember like being kids one time, and for most of my early matches, I was always wrestling Harry.
Right.
And there was a loop of shows. There was like a show. Harry's in school. He's real young. I'm trying to think. Maybe I just graduated high school, so I'm going off to do like a couple of shows around Alberta. And I remember in this bag were like this blue pair of tassel boots of Davies and these tights. I think maybe even Ted wore them for like one match one time, and I was like, they didn't have like a Union Jack on them, but they were
Were
like,
they the blue striped ones? The white
yep,
and blue ones?
yeah,
Yeah, I remember those.
blue striped ones, so I could kind of wear them and like it wouldn't be so apparent that they were like British Bulldog tights. I remember I told her, I said, I'm going to wear these. He said, you won't, you won't. And then I wore them, and it was because before that we'd always wear those singlets. So it was the
Yeah.
first time I wrestled like without like a singlet strap on, and like I remember. So the first time I wore like I wasn't wearing an amateur wrestling singlet. I was wearing Davies boots and Davies tights,
Right.
wrestling in like Trochu, Alberta, which you probably couldn't
That's
even find
awesome.
that place on a map. But I
Yeah,
wrestled
right.
multiple times there.
Yeah. You know
Harry's
what? I think I remember those tights. Davey wore them. He had that one weird singles match with Yokozuna on that one pay-per-view.
Yes, exactly.
I think he had a bad he had just torn his MCL or something. But
Ah,
yeah, because they didn't really do much in the match. I think it was a DQ, but I remember him wearing those tights in that match specifically.
and for whatever reason in my mind, that match is like real short too, right?
Yeah,
Which is
yeah,
probably part of the injury and stuff.
yeah.
And it
Harry
was right
since
after maybe the court case, right? Like it
Yeah,
all
would
occurred
have
that
been
time.
not far after that, yeah.
Yeah.
since Harry, we have you both, you and TJ. Just one, I think one of the most underrated matches in WWE history. It's your match against Tyson Kidd from Superstars from 2011. What I love about that match, it paid tribute to the legendary Davey versus Brett match, but you added some twists to make it a little bit different. What are your memories of that match?
Well, I remember was it in Philly?
Feeling, yeah,
Yeah.
good memory.
Which was cool because I mean the audience was good that night, but Philly was always a tough audience to work in front of because
And Philly loves like bad guys. And so like I always
yeah,
start on you like 2 weeks before where I kick you in the face, and then like we don't there's not like this crazy like video package before our match. So it's like there's not like this besides just like liking the work in the match, there's not this giant reason to get behind one guy or the other, except for that I at least maybe kicked you in the face, so I'm at least a bit of a jerk.
yeah,
But the people actually get way behind you, which like I always thought was awesome, and I always took a lot of pride in that match because I think uh, I'll let you answer. but Arn, I remember, told me that prior to the match, like not right before it, but like maybe when I first turned heel, Arn told me that um, family fighting doesn't work. It worked with Brett and Owen. He said that Brett and Owen worked, and that was like the only case of it. And they're just two rare people that it worked for. And he said he didn't see you and I wrestling each other and it drawing money or being good.
Yeah,
And
I remember that. And he said to the Steiner brothers, he's like, it's like when the Steiner brothers fight each other, the people just don't buy it.
yeah, and he said the latest version we did was with the Hardy Boys, and like same thing, they didn't buy it. And I remember thinking like, fair enough, but if we really got into the story, you could tell the story that I'm actually at that time, Maddie and I are married, so I'm not actually a family member, and you could paint it that I'm this little rat weasel. But anyway, without even the story, I knew like what kind of matches we'd had in the past, and I knew what kind of matches we'd have in WWE. So I wasn't worried about the in-ring work at all. And so I remember we come back from that match, and like the first two guys at the curtain, one is Arn, and Arn's like, guys, what I said before about family fighting, you guys killed it. We can make a lot. That was first of all, and Brawler, Brooklyn Brawler, who could be. I like Brawler. He's always great with me, but he can also be pessimistic when he wants to be. And I remember he's like, oh man, I can't do a good Brawler right now. I haven't heard his voice in a little while. But he was going crazy. He's like, that match was so good. He's like, I can't believe that. You guys can do that all the time. The match was so good. So that one was really cool because like Arn's a fan of ours, but to have him like almost doubt something was cool. It gave us something to really like watch this. And we did that earlier that year with Arn with the Usos in a tag match. We had the exact same conversation with Arn against Usos, which I just talked about the Usos 2 weeks ago, and like we always tell that story where he said like it's same thing, two tag teams that are both trying to get over at the same time. It doesn't work. And you and I just turned babyface with Brett, and Usos were brand new, and we were tag team champions. And we were planning to have this like crazy match on a live event. And Arn said, guys, just please keep it simple because like this doesn't usually work. We're in a tough spot. And we got to the back, and he pulled us outside, and there were those fans above on the little balcony. And Arn was like, we were trying to hide from the fans. And Arn said, oh, don't worry about that. I got over that a long time ago. And then he's like, guys, I was wrong. That match was awesome. And if you guys can do that every night, we got something special here.
Yeah, I remember that match was really awesome. We had some really good house show matches too.
Oh, man. You know what I'm working on getting on is MSG.
I was just going to say that. Yeah, that match was really good. Hopefully you can get a hold of that.
I will. I asked Carano before. He told me that, yeah, no problem. Just hit him with the date. And I literally talked to him like when I was last at Elimination Chamber in Philly, of all places. And that's the last time I've flown. So I like with everything going on, it's probably hard to get it now. But
of course, right.
Back to normal. Yeah. I have it written in my notes to get that MSG match. I've also talked with Hassan about it before too, because I'm so proud of that MSG match. And I want to see what it looks like back. But I remember like the back seeing things, thought you guys had a hell of a match. And you just thought that we did the clothesline over the rope. We just went to the floor or something. Clothesline over the top. But the match was awesome, man. It meant a lot to me because
I think it's just breaking up.
Yes.
But
we are losing.
Brett, no one had a singles match.
Okay, there we go.
MSG.
Yes.
I pulled into my house. Can you guys hear me? I was saying it was important. That MSG match to me, that singles match was important. And if you remember, it was a crazy blizzard.
I remember that because we had to go.
You were in Calgary and you had to fly in early.
Yeah, because I went there for Christmas. And then I got the call Christmas dinner at Ross's from Holly, and I got on a red eye to go to New York for that. And then as soon as we were done the match, we had to leave, right? Because we weren't going to wait till the next morning.
Oh,
were
man.
we traveling with Primo that weekend?
with Primo. It took 7 hours to
Yeah,
drive,
that's what it was.
2 hour drive.
Oh,
It was the craziest, Hassan, it was the craziest blizzard I've ever driven through. We got
Oh,
stuck
wow.
2 or 3 times. We got stuck like twice in the city. We got stuck another time. And then once we got unstuck from there, it was right before the highway. We were stuck. This truck finally got us out of there after like
Yeah.
over an hour. And we could literally go like 20 miles an hour down this highway. It was
Crazy.
so bad.
It's crazy.
oh, it was a bad blizzard. Horrible.
Actually, speaking of your match, guys, it's a great segue to talk about the Brait versus Davey matches. We don't want to take, I think the SummerSlam 92 match is being covered like a lot. Let's talk about the In Your House 5 match. So I really love this match. I think it had a different
Feel,
psychology to it. What do
yep.
you guys think about this specific match?
I really liked it because it had a different feel to it, you know. Like there was, of course, the roles were sort of not reversed, but Davey was working as a heel, whereas with
Right.
SummerSlam they were both baby faces, but Brett may have been more the protagonist, I guess, maybe in it. I'm not sure. But you know what? It was a good, solid kind of extreme match, I want to say, for
Yeah.
WWF at that time because nobody at that time was bleeding at all. You know,
Right.
the only
Yeah.
other time you would have seen any blood was when Hunter was in that Hogman match with
On
Henry
his neck.
Godwin, and he cut up his back from
Right.
that fence. That was by accident, but you didn't. There was no blood in WWF that time. So
Is that on the same show?
I think it was.
It is. It is.
Wow. That's
Yeah.
so funny. There's like no blood in WWF, and then there's like 2 matches on that card.
Yeah, which is crazy, but you know, both guys were total pros in the match. It was like I said, you know, like there was spots like with Brett. I think he back suplexed Davey onto the guardrail, like in
Right.
between his legs, like a nut shot. So
Yeah.
a lot of stuff like that just wasn't happening in those days. So it was different. I think if there was a match that needed blood or needed that kind of stuff, it was that match. And I
Yep.
think if you took that away from it, it probably wouldn't have been the same.
Yep.
That's what I think.
TJ,
The
thoughts
match
on that?
definitely has a different feel than SummerSlam, and I think it's supposed to. I think SummerSlam's kind of like the first act, and then what I like about it is, and you know, maybe it's due to a bunch of different circumstances, but I like that there wasn't a rematch right away. I like that the next match between those two is 3 years later, 3.5 years later.
Yeah.
Like that's, to me, that was cool. And I remember being excited, remembering like the SummerSlam 92 match and wondering how similar or different this one would be. And it was very different. And I think in a great way. I mean, it'd be hard to compare the two, like in terms of like, which one do I like more? Because I really like both and they are different. And you need that first one to set up that second one. That second one has a lot of, I mean, so does the first one, but that second one has a lot of funny, innovative stuff. Like Brett goes for that little like Vader bomb to the outside, and Davey catches him and power slams him on the floor. A lot of stuff that wasn't really happening in like really in wrestling, but really in WWF at that time, like hitting finishes on the floor and things of that nature. Like you said, the atomic drop thing on the post, I mean on the railing on the outside, things like that just like were a little bit creative and just different for the time. That wasn't like a thing happening every week.
Yeah,
I think
that's true.
Davey took a sick bump where I think Bret Irish whipped him to the turnbuckle, and Davey, he flipped and landed on his head.
Yes. Yep.
Yeah, I remember that. Wow.
It's
and then
funny.
the finish too, right? Like that was, for me, obviously, like if I was a Japanese fan, I would have probably seen it a million times over. But for me at that time, I hadn't seen that little Oklahoma roll.
Right.
Yeah, and it was a unique and creative finish. I think it fit for that match. You know, out of nowhere, Brett was on a big cell with the blood and everything, and like it's kind of funny because I'd never seen Brett do that before either.
Yeah, and exactly, and so on that
I think he's
counter
breaking up again. Yeah, there we go.
into a pin.
Yeah.
And so this one, the same thing. And what's funny is they actually wrestled 2 days before in Calgary on the Stu show.
Yes.
That's right. Yeah.
So
You know,
like, I remember
yeah.
at the time thinking like, man, this is a big risk. These guys have a pay-per-view main event in 2 days, and they're wrestling this Stu show in Calgary on like technically on an off day.
Right.
Yeah, exactly. That's crazy, man.
Let's talk about the British Bulldogs in WWF. I think before the Bulldogs, we had some pretty good teams. I think it was Murdoch and Adrian Adonis and the Wild Samoans. But man, when the Bulldogs came to the WWF, it was a total different game. What did they bring to the table to the WWF Tag Team division?
You know what's been really cool was during this whole coronavirus quarantine, there was a cool wrestling fan online that sent me all of the British Bulldogs tag team matches from when they first started in '84 WWF.
Right.
And going back and being able to watch those kind of was really cool because there was a few matches I hadn't seen before. And I don't think that the fans at that time had seen anything like it.
Oh, hell no.
And, you know, the speed that Dynamite was hitting the ropes at that time and the intensity he had in his snap suplexes and Davey showing unbelievable power moves and being able to be acrobatic, really acrobatic in his own right with at a guy that was, I think he was probably over 240 pounds at that time and was jacked. You know, you didn't really see guys like that were able to move like that. Yeah, you know, so it was really, you know, fans had never seen it, and it was perfect that Brett and Jim were in the company at that time because they were able to complement their styles, and they had worked with each other all in Stampede from years prior, you know, so I think that it was perfect timing for everybody at that time.
I've met so many people, and I understand those. We're going to probably get those kind of biased people, maybe more than others. But I've come across so many people who like that's like their first favorite kind of thing in wrestling is the British Bulldogs tag team.
Yeah,
like so many people.
I think they were the first team who introduced double tag team moves. I can't think of any team before them. Maybe in WWF coming up, I think they had where Davey presses slam Dynamite and he just throw him into the headbutt where Dynamite step over Davey's back into the headbutt. That was pretty cool.
Very cool. And even like the finish of like WrestleMania 2 is like they use like Davey uses the partner, right? And like he slams him into Dynamite's head who's on the second rope and it drops him to the floor and they win the tag title. It's just innovative and different things that weren't really happening at that time.
Yeah, exactly. Finishes that just happened that were perfect for what was going on. You know, it wasn't like not that it would have been anything wrong with Davey and Dynamite winning with one of their signature tag team moves, but that kind of out of nowhere. And I mean, that bump that Dynamite took to the floor, fuck. I mean, pardon my language, but especially for those days too, Jesus.
Yeah, nuts.
Yeah.
Let's end with, in my opinion, the two best or greatest Raw matches in history. First of all, Tyson, the European title match from Germany, Davey versus Owen. Tell us, like, do you remember when you first watched that match? What was your impression?
So what's funny is, that match is taped. That match is taped a few days before it airs on Raw.
Right.
And so I remember Sunday dinner, Davey has the European title at Stu's house. So I know, and so I knew Davey won the match, obviously, but I remember he said the match with Owen is really good. Like he was proud. He was really proud of that match with Owen. And Owen was they're both were very proud of this match before it had aired. And so I'm watching, I probably watched it at home that day, but as I'm watching, I know that like I know that there's this match that's going to air on TV that both guys that are in it, that are both super talented guys, both said the match is very good. So, like, I know it has a certain standard it has to meet, and it's going to surpass. So I was excited to see that match, and I, like, watching it, I almost didn't know what the hell I was even watching. It was, like, so good. I couldn't take it all in right away. And I remember recording it and just watching it over and over and over and over, and just, like, it being so impressed. But even to this day, I'm still so impressed by that match. And just, like, it was cool to see, like, there was a lot of cool things to the whole atmosphere of it, that it was in Germany. It's just, to this day, it's still the only Raw that ever aired from Germany.
True.
Yep.
So it's a different vibe and a different crowd, a very pro British Bulldog crowd, when both guys are complete heels in America. It's prior to the Hart Foundation, where they're baby faces everywhere else. It's just funny to see, like, Davey as this big baby face in 1997, as he's been a bad guy for, like, two years already in the States. So it was interesting. It was a very cool atmosphere, and I'm glad that match has been put on a lot of DVDs, like,
Yes.
Best of Raw and this DVD and this DVD. I'm glad it has, because if it hadn't, it might not get talked about as much. But now, like, I remember a friend of ours saw it got put on like a DVD, maybe for the third time. He's like, they always put this match on, and I was like, is that a bad thing? It's not a bad thing. It's a
Great.
great match. What would you prefer?
Harry, your
Yeah.
thoughts on the match?
You know what? I remember the match really well, and watching it over and over again. One thing I remember about it was when Davey brought home the European title. It's weird. Like, there was this old scent that all the wrestlers seemed to have, and the belt, like, when he would open up his bag, like, he had the title in the, it was like almost like a black velvet sack. And whenever he would open it up or open up his title, it had this weird scent of, like, hot stuff mixed with Fahrenheit cologne and some kind of like this weird scent that all these wrestlers had. I think it was mostly the hot stuff, or like almost like a Tiger Bomb scent. So I remember the title.
I remember going to every show you'd go to backstage, you'd smell that.
Yeah, and Davey loved Fahrenheit, so you would always smell that all over his. So I remember the title smelling like that, and you know, the match was really awesome. I remember him telling me about it before it had aired, and I think he had been watching a lot of his older stuff from Japan and early, like, WWF stuff, because they did the spot where he had Owen in a hammerlock, and he went to flip behind him, and then he dropped him like Brutus Beefcake did with Davey.
On his arm.
So just stuff like that. I think we had been watching for a couple weeks prior. That kind of just, I think it sparked some ideas, and he used them, which was really cool, you know. But the match was awesome. I think it was probably their last great WWF match together.
Tyson,
that's crazy.
I always, like, talk to you about how much I love this tag match, the Davey Owen tag against Austin and Shawn. Man, I love.
Yeah, you love it. You love that match so much.
It is my favorite tag match of all time.
Yeah, you love that match.
Yeah. Have you seen it recently, or?
So I was watching it in a production meeting a while ago, and then I got distracted having to actually do work, so I didn't finish it. But I was watching it. But so I haven't seen it like from start to finish. I haven't seen it recently.
No, you need to rewatch it, man.
I know.
And
you love that match. You tell me about it all the time.
Harry, just tell us about the chemistry between Shawn and Davey. They always have awesome matches.
Oh, yeah, they certainly did. You know, I think it even dates back to their first Intercontinental title match in October of '92. I really liked that match in particular, the story that they told.
With the back.
Yeah, you know, it was cool, and the finish was cool and unique. Davey went to superplex him, and his back gave out, and Shawn landed on top. But, you know, years later, you know, they tore it up with the matches at the Inner House, both of them. I mean, the first one wasn't as good because the lights all went out, and Davey said that he thought that they were doing a match just for the
Not
live
even on
was
pay-per-view, right?
yeah. So they went out and match was okay, but they were going to try to film the finish to show with the German suplex and that. And then he was told after it aired live, and he's like, "Why didn't anybody tell us?" And they ended up having a really great one at King of the Ring.
It's
After that, so. And their one night only one was really good too. I preferred the King of the Ring one over that one though.
Yeah.
King of the Ring was awesome. The finish was a little perplexing with like Mr. Perfect. I didn't understand.
Yeah.
It's funny, like the super kick from Sean to Davey. It's always funny. For some reason, it's always strange in a way. I don't know if you guys noticed that.
Yes, it's something like there's something weird also when Sean super kicks 1-2-3 kid for some weird reason.
Right.
Right, it doesn't look the same as other super. I don't know what it is.
Yes.
Yeah, it's weird because like whenever he would super kick 1-2-3 kid, he would take a super fast back bump.
Yep.
And it just wouldn't look the same.
And then I
like
feel
when he hit Brett
would
at
come off
WrestleMania with those two, it was like not like a tree falling down, but it was that like knockout blow that added to it more real, and it just looked more effective. And I think it was too. I think Brett had a shiner after that. Run. Yeah.
So, an ending note, guys, I'm just going to ask some random questions to you each. Tyson, what did you prefer, Davey, as a face or a heel?
So even as a kid, like I always liked heels, so I liked him as a heel. But I also, at the flip side, I understand in Europe and in those markets why having him as a babyface would be more important. But I liked him as a heel. I think I liked that he totally changed his look when he turned heel. Like he had that crazy, like frizzy long hair, and he just straight up cut it short. He had it long hair like that 1 week on Raw, and the next week he has short hair and totally changes his look.
Do you agree, Harry, or did you like him as a heel or a face?
Well, I liked him as both at different times. I liked him as a heel in '97 when they were doing the USA versus Canada kind of angle. And, he did some pretty funny stuff as a heel then. Like, I remember they were all celebrating on the ramp, and Brett was in the wheelchair with his knee that had been operated on.